The fog clung to the trail like a shroud, muffling the world into a gray hush. Henry stood there, his boots rooted in the frost-kissed earth, the leash dangling limp from his hand like a severed lifeline. "Scout." He whispered the word, dissolving into the mist unanswered. His chest tightened, a quiet vice of dread squeezing out the air, as if the forest itself had stolen his companion. In that suspended moment, the wilderness stretched endless, a vast emptiness echoing his own solitary unyielding. He scanned the pines, their needles whispering secrets he couldn't decipher, and wondered if the dog had simply vanished into the void that had been gnawing at him for years. The forest loomed as a living labyrinth, its jagged cliffs rising like the spines of ancient beasts half buried in the earth, veiled by a fog that tasted of damp decay on Henry's tongue. Pines whispered in the wind, their branches clawing at the sky, shedding needles that crunched underfoot like brittle bones. Scout's paw prints trailed ahead, faint impressions in the frost, curving toward a narrow ravine where the ground dropped away sharply, rocks slick with ice glinting like hidden fangs. The air bit cold, carrying the faint metallic scent of impending snow, while distant howls, coyotes, or wolves echoed through the canopy, a chorus of hunger that mirrored the ache in Henry's gut. This wasn't just wilderness. It was a predator swallowing trails and secrets alike, its shadows pooling deeper as the light faded, promising to devour any who lingered too long. Henry pressed on the prints, his only thread fraying into uncertainty. Henry's knees buckled slightly, the leash slipping through his fingers to coil on the frozen ground like a discarded promise. Why didn't I hold tighter? The thought looped in his mind, a relentless echo pulling him back to that rain-slicked day years ago when his brother's car had vanished into the river, gone in an instant, just like Scout. He pressed a palm to his forehead as if to staunch the bleeding memories, but they seeped through Scout's eager trot beside him that morning, tail high like a flag of unwavering faith, now reduced to this hollow ache. His breath came in shallow rasps, the cold air stabbing his lungs, but he felt nothing numb, as if the fog had seeped into his soul, blanketing the fire that once drove him. Rachel's voice ghosted in his head, her concerned pleas from home, "Don't go alone." But alone was all he knew now, the wilderness amplifying his isolation, a mirror to the void where Scout should be. He gripped the collar in his pocket, the metal tags jingling faintly like a mocking reminder of loyalty betrayed by his own hands. Failure wasn't new. It was an old scar reopening wider with each unanswered call. He stared into the mist, paralyzed, the world narrowing to the pounding in his chest, a silent scream he couldn't voice. A rustle sliced through the fog, faint but deliberate like breath held too long. Henry's head snapped up, his pulse a drumbeat in the silence, eyes straining against the veil of mist where shadows danced like phantoms. Was it Scout, or something else, eyes watching patient and unseen? A low whine carried on the wind, distant yet piercing, tugging at the frayed edges of his hope. He took a step forward, the ground shifting underfoot, and in that heartbeat a flicker, two amber points glowing briefly in the haze, gone before he could blink. Not just a dog lost, but a secret stirring the forest, whispering of trails not taken, truths buried deep. The air grew heavier, pregnant with promise or peril, as if change crouched just beyond sight, ready to pounce. Flashbacks assaulted Henry like shards of glass in the fog, pulling him from the trail's edge to warmer days, when the sun dappled the paths he shared with Scout. 5 years ago, he'd found the pup at a shelter, a trembling ball of fur, with eyes like polished obsidian, mirroring the void left by his brother's death, a hiking accident on these very cliffs where a sudden slip had claimed him, leaving Henry to carry the guilt like an unseen backpack. Back then, life pulsed with vitality, mornings breaking camp with Scout bounding ahead, tail a metronome of joy, their hikes a ritual of escape from the city's clamor, where Henry worked as a guide, teaching others to conquer the wild he secretly feared. Scout became his shadow, loyal through storms and sunsets, a silent companion who didn't ask about the nightmares where Henry's calls for his brother echoed unanswered. But now, with Scout gone, that past vitality mocked him, the laughter shared over campfires reduced to ashes. The wilderness, once a healer, now a thief, stripping away the last tether to wholeness. Henry paused on the trail, hand pressing against a pine's rough bark, feeling the sap stick like old regrets, wondering if losing Scout was punishment for never truly healing, for letting isolation become his armor. Back at the cabin that evening, Henry's world shrank to the flicker of a lantern on the wooden table map sprawled like veins across its surface, red marks tracing futile search patterns. He moved mechanically, boiling water for coffee he wouldn't drink, staring at Scout's empty bed by the hearth, the woven blanket still indented with the ghost of his form. Rachel hovered in the doorway, her eyes soft with concern, but Henry waved her off with a grunt, the words, "I'll find him," hanging unspoken, a mantra to ward off the numbness creeping through his veins like frost. Each day blurred into the next dawn patrols through the mist boots caked in mud calls, swallowed by the wind returning to the hollow space where Scout's barks once filled the air. Internally, he armored himself with routine checking gear, avoiding mirrors that reflected a man hollowed out his thoughts, a loop of what-ifs that kept grief at bay. The cabin's walls, lined with faded photos of hikes past, closed in like a cage echoing his emotional freeze, a protective shell cracked only by the faint hope that Scout was out there waiting as lost as he was. Scout's scars told a story etched in fur and flesh, hidden beneath his sleek black and tan coat, now matted with the wilderness's grime as Henry imagined him out there alone. Adopted from a rescue where he'd been discarded like a broken tool, Scout had once been a search and rescue prodigy, trained by a handler whose fists fell as often as commands, leaving cigarette burns along his flank like cruel constellations. In those days, Scout's nose had led him through tempests and thickets, unearthing lost hikers with a precision that bordered on the supernatural. His reward a pat or a kick depending on the man's mood. But one mission shattered him, a missing girl in these same fog-bound woods, her trail vanishing near a cliff's edge. Scout's frantic barks ignored as the handler accused him of failure, chaining him out in the rain until betrayal seeped into his bones. When Henry found him, Scout's eyes held a guarded fire, his body lean from starvation, tail tucked not in fear but in calculated mistrust, every muscle coiled like a spring ready to snap. Yet over time, Henry's steady presence coaxed out the hero beneath Scout's loyalty, blooming in quiet ways, like pressing close during thunderstorms, his warm weight a balm against Henry's own ghosts, now vanished into the mist. Scout's past likely clawed at him, survival instincts flaring, the scars itching under his skin, a reminder that trust was fragile, the wilderness both enemy and old ally. Henry pictured him huddled under a pine, ears pricked for threats, his silent pain a mirror to the man's, both betrayed by those meant to protect, both fighting to believe in second chances. In the dim light of recollection, Henry saw the echoes between them, Scout's scarred hide and his own invisible wounds, both etched by loss and forged in isolation. Like Scout chained in the rain after a failed search, Henry had withdrawn after his brother's fall, building walls of solitude that the dog had slowly dismantled with his unwavering gaze, those amber eyes reflecting back the emptiness Henry tried to ignore. Their routines had synced in healing rhythms, evenings by the fire where Scout's head rested on Henry's knee, a nonverbal pact against the world's cruelties, his soft whines pulling Henry from the abyss of regret. Now with Scout gone, that mirror cracked Henry's calls into the fog, paralleling Scout's past barks for the lost girl, both unanswered, both laced with a desperation that bound them deeper. Internally, Henry whispered to the absent dog, imagining Scout's instincts mirroring his own resolve, sniffing for trails, as Henry pored over maps their shared emptiness, a bridge toward mutual redemption, where trust wasn't given, but earned through quiet persistence. The wilderness amplified it, a vast canvas, where their pains intertwined Scout's mistrust, from abuse echoing Henry's guilt. Yet in that symmetry lay hope, a promise that finding each other again would mend the fractures step by cautious step. The storm descended like a veil of fury, whipping sleet across Henry's face as he descended into the ravine, his flashlight beam slicing through the chaos like a desperate plea. There, etched in the frost-glazed mud, were Scout's tracks, deep, erratic, veering toward a jagged outcrop where the ground plummeted into shadow. Henry's heart hammered a thunder, matching the wind's howl as the beam caught a glint. Scout huddled against the cliff's base, his fur sodden and streaked with blood from a gash on his flank. eyes wide with a mix of pain and recognition. The dog's breath puffed in ragged clouds, his body trembling not just from cold, but from some deeper exhaustion, the wilderness's grip evident in the way rocks loomed overhead, threatening to crumble. Sensory overload gripped Henry, the metallic tang of blood mingling with wet earth, the sting of ice pellets on skin, as urgency surged Scout's weak lift of head, a silent cry that pierced the storm's roar. Henry froze at the ravine's edge, the wind tugging at his coat like insistent doubts, his mind a battlefield where logic clashed with the raw pull of compassion. What if he's too far gone? The thought slithered in, laced with memories of his brother's lifeless form pulled from the river, the fear of another loss paralyzing him mid-step. Scout's eyes locked onto his amber depths, pleading yet guarded, a whimper escaping like a fragile thread in the gale, tipping the scale from rational retreat, turn back, get help, to the irrational surge of empathy that screamed he couldn't abandon him again. Internally, Henry argued the cliff was treacherous, his hands numb, but that gaze mirroring his own buried pain eroded the walls of hesitation, compassion winning in a heartbeat's surrender. Commitment surged through Henry like a dam breaking, propelling him over the ravine's lip boots, skidding on the ice-slicked slope as gravity clawed at him. Rocks tumbled in his wake, clattering like accusations, his hands scraping raw against jagged outcrops that bit like teeth into his palms. Below, Scout whimpered his body, a dark silhouette against the frost blood matting his fur in crimson streaks that gleamed wetly in the flashlight's erratic beam. Henry's breath-ragged lungs burning from the cold's knife edge. He half slid, half fell, the final feet landing in a heap beside the dog knees, sinking into the mud that reeked of earth and iron. Shaking fingers reached out, tentative at first, brushing Scout's flank, warm alive but flinching under the touch, a caution born of old scars. With a grunt that masked his fear, Henry scooped the dog into his arms. Scout's weight heavy yet fragile, like holding a storm in check. The climb back was a blur of strain muscles, screaming ice cracking underfoot. But as he crested the edge, laying Scout gently on solid ground, their eyes met Henry's resolve. Hardening Scout's gaze, softening just a fraction, the shift from doubt to devotion sealed in that messy, imperfect ascent. Henry trudged through the waning storm, Scout cradled against his chest like a precious secret, the dog's warmth seeping through his jacket as a counterpoint to the wind's relentless chill. He found shelter in a shallow cave, its mouth yawning like a reluctant confession, walls damp and echoing with the drip of melting ice. Setting Scout down on a bed of pine needles, Henry worked by lantern light, his hands steadying as he cleaned the gash water from his canteen, mixing with blood, the metallic scent sharp in the confined air. Scout lay still, eyes tracking every movement, a low growl rumbling once when the cloth pressed too hard, but he didn't snap, allowing the touch with a wariness that spoke of battles long fought. Internally, Henry vowed, "I'll find out why you ran, boy, unravel whatever ghost chased you here." As he bandaged the wound with strips torn from his shirt, Scout's tail thumped faintly once a tentative olive branch in the silence. The cave warmed with their shared breath, the storm outside a fading roar, and in that flicker of reliance, Scout's head dipping slightly toward Henry's knee, a bond reformed fragile as new ice, but promising to hold against the encroaching dark. Henry sat back, exhaustion etching lines on his face, yet a quiet determination bloomed. This rescue was more than saving a dog. It was reclaiming a piece of himself. In the cave's dim embrace, Henry sat cross-legged by the sputtering fire, its flames casting elongated shadows that danced like uneasy spirits on the stone walls. Scout lay at the far edge, a coiled silhouette of black and tan, his amber eyes fixed on Henry with an unblinking intensity that spoke of walls not yet breached. A low growl rumbled from the dog's throat when Henry shifted, not aggressive, but a boundary drawn in sound, his body rigid as if the touch of rescue still burned like a fresh betrayal. The wind howled outside, a symphony of isolation that mirrored their standoff. Henry's hands idle in his lap, respecting the invisible line, his internal monologue, a whisper of patience. Give him time like you needed after the river took everything. Scout's ears flicked at every crackle of the fire, his gaze never wavering, a sentinel in his own fortress, the scent of damp fur and smoke thickening the air between them. No words passed, only the silent negotiation of space. Henry's steady breathing a counterpoint to Scout's shallow pants, the wilderness pressing in as if testing their fragile truce. Internally, Henry ached with the distance, seeing his own guarded heart in the dog's posture, yet he held back knowing trust couldn't be forced, only invited through the quiet endurance of presence. The fire's glow softened as Henry unwrapped a strip of jerky from his pack, the salty scent wafting through the cave like a tentative olive branch. He tore off a piece, holding it out at arm's length, his voice a murmur lost in the crackle. "Here, boy, you need this more than I do." Scout's nose twitched, amber eyes narrowing as he sniffed the air, but he remained rooted, body low to the ground, a statue carved from mistrust. Internally, Henry felt the echo of his own wounds, the hollow after his brother's death, when even food tasted like ash, and whispered aloud, "I know what it's like to run from ghosts." The confession hanging heavy, vulnerability cracking his voice. Scout watched, unblinking, his flanks rising and falling in rhythm with Henry's sighs, their shared silence a bridge over unspoken scars, the dog's from handler's cruelty, the man's from loss's bite. Gradually, Scout inched forward, not fully committing his gaze, observant, cataloging Henry's stillness as if measuring the depth of the pain they both carried. The jerky lay untouched between them, a symbol of offering the cave's chill, easing slightly in the warmth of mutual recognition, where words weren't needed. Only the quiet acknowledgement that healing began in the shadows they shared. A twig snapped under Henry's boot, the sharp crack echoing through the cave like a gunshot from memory, jolting both man and dog into frozen stillness. Scout's ears flattened, his body tensing, as if the sound summoned ghosts. Flashes of his past handler's whip cracking in the air, the sting of betrayal that left him cowering in a kennel rein, pounding like accusations. Henry, too, was pulled under the riverbank where his brother's rope had frayed and snapped, the lead slipping from his grasp as the current claimed what he couldn't hold. Internally, Henry murmured, "We both let go too soon," his hand extending slowly, palm up, a gentle gesture that hovered in the space between them. Scout paused, nostrils flaring at the familiar scent, his amber eyes softening from steel to embers, no longer recoiling but lingering as if recognizing the shared fracture in Henry's voice. The moment stretched, the fire's pop weaving their histories. Scout's abuse mirroring Henry's guilt into a tentative thread, the dog's head tilting slightly, acceptance blooming in the absence of retreat. Emotion swelled without utterance, a quiet bridge formed by that small hesitation where pain acknowledged pain and trust began to mend the breaks. The cave's chill receded as Henry chuckled softly, the sound bubbling up unexpected like sunlight piercing storm clouds, prompted by Scout's tentative nudge toward the jerky still lying between them. "Attaboy," Henry whispered, tearing another piece and offering it from his hand, the meat's savory warmth contrasting the cold stone beneath. Scout hesitated, then leaned in, lips brushing Henry's fingers, gently accepting the food with a delicacy that belied his scars, the first voluntary touch a spark igniting in the dim light. Internally, Henry felt a thaw, the numbness from days of searching melting into a tentative joy, memories of Scout's playful bounds on sunlit trails resurfacing like forgotten embers. The dog's tail thumped once faintly against the pine needles, a rhythm syncing with the fire's crackle, transforming the space from a refuge of necessity to one of budding comfort. Sensory details enveloped them, the jerky's salt on tongue, the fur's subtle warmth as Scout inched closer, the air now laced with pine smoke and shared breath. Laughter lingered in Henry's eyes, a warmth spreading through his chest, while Scout's posture eased, muscles uncoiling, the wilderness outside seeming less a threat and more a distant murmur. In that small act, eating from hand, a gaze held without wariness, their bond flickered alive, a quiet promise of safety amid the shadows where hope dared to bloom. The fire dwindled to embers, casting a ruddy glow that painted the cave walls in hues of forgotten sunsets as Scout stirred from his distant corner, his movements deliberate like a shadow deciding to step into light. Henry sat motionless, breath held his internal world a tumult of hope and fear. "Don't spook him, let him come," as the dog's paws padded softly across the stone, each step a quiet declaration against the scars that had kept him walled off. Scout's amber eyes, once veiled in caution, now held a softness reflecting the fire's warmth, and he paused inches away, nostrils flaring at Henry's scent, familiar yet newly inviting. Then, with a sigh that seemed to exhale years of mistrust, Scout leaned in his head, resting heavily on Henry's thigh, the weight of profound surrender, fur warm and slightly damp against the man's jeans. Henry's eyes brimmed, a single tear tracing his cheek, overwhelmed by the initiation. This wasn't coerced, but chosen Scout's body, relaxing fully for the first time, tail sweeping lazily in the dust. Sensory richness enveloped the moment, the crackle of dying coals, the musky earthiness of Scout's coat mingling with pine smoke. Henry's hand hovering before gently descending to stroke the dog's ears, eliciting a content rumble that vibrated through them both. Internally, Henry marveled, "You've carried so much, boy, but here we are, the bond transcending words, a full emotional yield, where vulnerability met vulnerability, sealing their alliance in the hush of the wilderness night." The cave felt transformed, no longer a shelter, but a sanctuary where trust bloomed unbidden. Scout's lick on Henry's hand, a salty promise of loyalty, renewed his lean in, a bridge over the chasms of their pasts. The cave's peace fractured as dawn's gray light seeped in the fog outside, thickening like a shroud drawn tight, and Scout's ears pricked suddenly, his body snapping from rest to rigid alertness. A low growl built in his throat, not the playful rumble of before, but a primal warning, his gaze fixed on the entrance where shadows shifted unnaturally in the mist. Henry stirred, heart quickening at the change. "What's out there?" as Scout's hackles rose, fur bristling like needles, his posture a statue of tension, nostrils flaring at scents carried on the damp wind. Internally, Henry sensed the shift, the wilderness morphing from ally to adversary, echoes of Scout's past traumas resurfacing in the way he froze, eyes darting to unseen threats. The air grew heavy, laced with the sharp tang of impending rain. Distant rustles amplifying the unease, branches snapping. Footsteps, Scout's stillness a harbinger, his instincts honed from old missions screaming danger before Henry could perceive it. Subtle signs mounted, a faint whine escaping Scout's lips, his tail tucked low, the cave's warmth yielding to a chill that mirrored the resurfacing ghosts, foreshadowing a threat tied to the dog's buried history. The cave's tension snapped as Rachel's silhouette emerged through the fog, her voice calling Henry's name, strained yet urgent boots crunching on gravel outside. Scout's growl erupted into a sharp bark, his body lunging forward, teeth bared in a protective snarl that halted Rachel mid-step, her face paling under the lantern's glow. Henry's heart lurched. Why's he reacting like this? As flashes of Scout's past mission surfaced in his mind, the dog sniffing a scarf, the missing girl's scent, Rachel's scent now impossibly intertwined, triggering recognition in Scout's rigid stance. Internally, Henry grappled with betrayal's sting, his thoughts spiraling. She said she came to help, but why does Scout know her? Rachel's vague answers, "I just wanted to find you," clashed with her evasive eyes, stirring memories of late-night whispers about a case she never fully explained, her volunteer work with search teams years ago. Scout's aggression intensified, a low whine threading through his barks, echoing the pain of that failed mission, the girl's trail lost forever. Henry's voice cracked, demanding, "What aren't you telling me?" The question a blade cutting through their trust, the cave amplifying their emotional explosion. Rachel's silence a confession that unraveled their shared past, leaving Henry and Scout united in the raw wound of recognition. A shadow loomed beyond Rachel, heavier, deliberate, a man stepping through the mist, his weathered face and scarred knuckles marking him as Scout's former handler, the one whose cruelty had left burns on the dog's flank. Scout's snarl turned feral body low and trembling as the handler's voice rasped, "Thought you'd keep my dog, huh?" His eyes glinting with possessiveness, a threat that turned the cave's air thick with menace. Henry's pulse roared, realization crashing. This man was tied to the missing girl, to Rachel's secrets, the wilderness, a vault for their shared sin. "You left him to rot," Henry spat, stepping in front of Scout, whose protective stance mirrored his own, their bond a shield against the past's return. Rachel's voice faltered, admitting she'd known the handler had hidden his failure to save the girl, to protect her own involvement, her guilt a shadow now exposed. The confrontation crackled. Scout's teeth flashed, The handler's hand twitched toward a knife. Henry's fists clenched, each word a spark in the tinder dry air, the cave walls closing in like a jury. Sensory details sharpened the handler's sour breath. Scout's fur bristling against Henry's leg, Rachel's trembling hands. The standoff held a primal dance of recognition and rage until the handler stepped back, outnumbered his retreat, a temporary reprieve, leaving Henry and Scout locked in mutual defiance, the wilderness witnessing their unbreakable stand. The handler's footsteps faded into the fog, leaving the cave steeped in a heavy silence, broken only by Scout's labored breaths and the distant drip of water from the ceiling. Henry sank against the wall, his body aching from the tension, eyes flicking to Rachel as she backed away, her whispered, "I'm sorry," dissolving like mist, the trust between them frayed beyond immediate repair. Scout pressed closer, his flank against Henry's leg, a warm anchor in the chill, his gaze steady and unyielding, as if reaffirming their pact amid the wreckage. Internally, Henry felt the closure settle, a chapter of deception, shut the past's grip loosening. As he stroked Scout's fur, the dog's soft whine, a promise, echoed in Henry's murmur, "We're in this together now." The wilderness outside hushed. The threat receded, their physical closeness, a silent vow of protection, mending the bond in quiet strokes, a fragile peace reclaiming the space where chaos had raged. As dusk bled into the forest, subtle omens wove through the underbrush branches, snapping crisply in the distance, not from wind, but deliberate weight. Scout's ears pivoting like radars toward the unseen. Henry paused on the trail pack, heavy on his back, his senses sharpening at Scout's low whine, the dog's body tensing, hackles rising in a ripple of instinctual warning. Internally, he thought, something's following us, the wilderness alive with watchfulness, shadows elongating like fingers grasping at their heels. A footprint appeared in the mud, too fresh, too human, mismatched with their own, while birds fell silent overhead, their absence a harbinger louder than cries. Scout's gaze darted, nostrils flaring at scents carried on the breeze, sweat leather malice, his posture a sentinel's urging Henry onward yet alert. The air thickened, pregnant with unease, each rustle amplifying the stalker's presence, building a crescendo of dread where every tree hid potential peril, their bond, the only light in the encroaching dark. The clearing erupted into chaos as the handler and two burly accomplices burst from the underbrush, their forms materializing like specters from the fog, knives glinting under the fractured moonlight. Henry's breath caught the air, reeking of sweat and malice, as the handler sneered, "That dog's mine, and so's the truth you dug up," his voice a gravelly threat that echoed the wilderness's growl. Scout's body went rigid beside him, scars seeming to pulse with remembered pain, a deep snarl ripping from his throat as the men advanced, encircling them in a tightening noose of intent. The danger crystallized, blades, drawn boots stomping the frost-crusted ground. The handler's eyes locked on Scout with possessive fury, promising violence not just to reclaim, but to silence. Henry's mind raced flashbacks to the river's edge, blending with this imminent loss, his hand instinctively reaching for a fallen branch as a makeshift weapon, the wood rough and unyielding in his grip. Scout lunged slightly, teeth bared in a protective arc, but a kick from one accomplice grazed his side, eliciting a yelp that pierced Henry's core. The confrontation was visceral bodies closing in the wilderness, a silent witness to the unraveling Rachel's secrets, now a catalyst for this raw standoff where survival hung on the edge of a blade, the threat to their bond, their lives inescapably real. In the heart of the ambush, Henry's world narrowed to a single searing choice, fight or flee, as the handler's knife arced toward Scout, the dog's body twisting to shield him, a selfless barrier of fur and loyalty. Time slowed, the fog swirling like a shroud, Henry's internal storm raging. "I can't lose him. Not after everything." The words a catalyst, propelling him forward, branch swinging in a wide arc to clash against the assailant's arm with a sickening crack. Scout exploded into action, jaws clamping onto an accomplice's leg, his growl a thunderous vow of protection, blood and fury mingling in the air as the man howled, staggering back. Henry's breath came in gasps, muscles burning, but resolve hardened like steel, mutual defense, transforming fear into ferocity. His free hand grasping Scout's collar, not to restrain, but to anchor their movements, sinking in a dance of desperation. The handler lunged again, eyes wild with rage, but Henry met him head-on, a punch landing square on his jaw, the impact reverberating through his knuckles, while Scout's leap knocked another attacker off balance, teeth flashing in the dim light. Sensory overload gripped them, the metallic tang of blood, the thud of bodies against earth, the wilderness's whispers amplifying their struggle. As the third man hesitated, seeing the unbreakable tandem, Henry shouted, "He's mine now, back off." The words a declaration, emotional resolution, flooding him like a tide washing away doubt. The attackers faltered, retreating into the shadows with curses, leaving Henry and Scout panting, battered but unbroken, the dog's head pressing against his leg in quiet affirmation. In that decisive act, protecting each other without hesitation, their bond crystallized a profound shift from vulnerability to unbreakable alliance, the climax's fury yielding to a cathartic peace amid the lingering echoes of danger. The clearing's frenzy faded into a hush as Henry and Scout limped toward a shallow overhang, the wilderness exhaling in soft rustles, the fog lifting like a reluctant curtain to reveal stars pricking the velvet sky. Henry eased onto a mossy log, his body a map of bruises and cuts, breath slow and deliberate, matching Scout's rhythmic pants as the dog settled beside him, head drooping in exhaustion. The air hung heavy with the scent of damp earth and faint blood, but the chaos receded, replaced by a fragile stillness, minimal movements. Henry's hand resting lightly on Scout's flank, feeling the steady rise and fall, a reassurance of survival. Internally, he reflected on the frayed threads of trust with Rachel, the secrets unearthed like roots in soil. But here in this quiet aftermath, the bond with Scout anchored him, a silent decompression, where long pauses stretched between breaths. Soft sentences formed in his mind, unspoken. "We made it, boy." The overhang sheltered them, shadows lengthening gently the night's peace, a balm on their wounds, signaling a tentative return to safety amid the lingering echoes of the fight. Dawn's light filtered through the canopy, casting golden flecks on the trail, as Henry and Scout moved in unison, their steps a steady tempo, weaving through the pines, the wilderness now a companion rather than foe. Henry offered Scout water from his canteen, the dog lapping steadily, his tongue pink against the metal, while Henry ate a trail bar, sharing a morsel that Scout accepted with a gentle nudge. Small actions repeated, building layers of recovery like bark on a healing tree. Sensory details enveloped them, the crunch of leaves underfoot, the warm press of Scout's body against Henry's leg during pauses, the fresh pine scent mingling with their mingled breaths, each element intertwining behavior and emotion. Internally, Henry felt the wounds mending, not just the physical gashes, but the deeper scars of betrayal, mirrored in Scout's softening gaze, the dog's tail wagging faintly as they crested a hill overlooking a valley bathed in mist. Over time, their bond deepened silently, Scout following closer, Henry speaking softly of home, their parallel arcs converging in mutual solace. The path ahead, a metaphor for rebirth. Steady and unhurried emotions rising like the sun, warm and persistent. The trail unfurled under a breaking sun, its rays piercing the canopy like threads of gold as Henry whispered, "Scout," the name a soft invocation hanging in the crisp air. The dog halted, ears perking, then turned with a deliberate grace, his amber eyes meeting Henry's in a gaze unbroken, profound, a mirror of souls mended. In that suspended breath, Scout pressed close shoulder to thigh, their strides sinking effortlessly, paws and boots imprinting the earth in tandem, a quiet symphony of motion where hands hovered near fur breaths, mingled in rhythm, the wilderness whispering approval. Emotion crested in Henry's chest, a release like exhaling long-held fear, the gesture symbolizing utter trust, a rebirth etched in the simple act of walking side by side, though a faint shadow of memory lingered in the fog's retreat.